I've reached my second back stitch here. The other thing I have also done is I've counted down, because we have no bar here, on these other ones we have a bar here, and before that bar, from that bar to this gold ring is 5 pins, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because I have no bar here, I've counted down my 5 pins and I've put a pin in the pinhole, because this is where the point where I'm going to change from the pattern back into cloth stitch. So I've put it in and I've pushed it all the way down. So I'm about to do my back stitch. So I'm going to cloth stitch and twist, half stitch through 2 pairs, and then cloth stitch and twist. So the first time you use your back stitch, you work it as normal. Pin up, give everything a little tension, and then work back in your pattern to the other side. I put my extra twist on. So just give everything a little bit of attention to get rid of all your knots, all your loops. So this time, because I'm going to be using that same pin a second time, I'm going to cloth stitch and twist, half stitch through 2 pairs, but I'm not using this end pair. I'm going to lift up my thread, put it anti-clockwise around my pin, and put my worker pair on the outside. I'm then going to lift up the pair that I didn't work and place it over my worker pair. And if I want to bring my, because my worker leader bobbin here is this side, if I want that to carry on, I put a twist on. So you can see it now carries on. It's got quite a lot of thread on it. So that's how you do your back stitch. And I'm just going to scoot down to where I put my pin. Hopefully it won't take me too long. I should have done another one of, here's one I did earlier. So I'm just tensioning up as I go, not completely, just enough to remove those loops. I'm going a bit fast here. Now when I get to the bottom where I have to sew in, I only have 3 pinholes and I've got 5 pairs. So I'm going to show you, hopefully I'll be able to reach that point and I'll be able to show you. It's probably making very boring viewing at the moment. There is something very relaxing about the sound of your bobbins on your pillow. One thing I will say, we're working a circle, and you do need to keep turning your pillow so that your trail is actually going in the direction that you are working. Quite often we leave our pillow behind and then you'll find that you're working at an odd angle and you're going to get backache. So I would turn your pillow more often than you actually think you need to. It's nothing worse than sitting for a couple of hours and then getting up and finding that you've got backache. And this is, we're now making lace for enjoyment, so I don't want any repetitive strain injuries. Okay, nearly there. Couple more pins. should have put this into fast forward. Okay, so back to the other side, and then we will have reached that pin. So just as I started the pattern, I started it gradually, so I'm also going to change the pattern gradually as well. I'm going to leave the cross stitch and twist edge, so I've reached that pin, so I've come across and I'm pinning that pin in as normal. So I'm going to leave the cross stitch and twist edges because they don't take up an awful lot of space, and we've still got quite a wide trail. And I'm going to now put a cross stitch on this first pair, or the second pair from the right, which is the first pair that was making a half stitch. So I've done a cross stitch. I'm now going to twist my worker pair because I want to half stitch this second pair, because I'm going to do them one at a time, so it's gradual, not a complete straight into the next pattern, back into the cross stitch. So I'm going to cross stitch and twist. I'm still half stitching this one because I want to do 2 rows and then change. So that's the second time I've gone through that pair, putting a twist on my worker to work my cross stitch and twist edge. Pin up. So I'm just going to tension everything. So now we have the cross stitch and twist as normal. This pair has been cross stitched twice, so I now want to put this pair into cross stitch. So I'm going to cross stitch and twist, cross stitch, cross stitch. Now because I've come out of my cross stitch, this worker pair has no twists, and I still want to do my cross stitch and twist edge. So I'm going to put a twist on that pair and cross stitch and twist. You always want to twist your pair before doing a cross stitch and twist because it creates the gap. The cross stitch and twist edge is always a very decorative edge. Right, so I've put my cross stitch and twist on. You want to leave that half stitch, that twist on that pair before working the cross stitch, because otherwise it won't leave your gap. So now I'm cross stitching through 2, putting my twist on my worker pair and working a cross stitch and twist edge. Pin up. So you can see now it has now got a lot tighter because the trail is shrinking slightly. Cross stitch and twist edge, cross stitch through 2 pairs, twist the worker pair and cross stitch and twist. Pin up. Just move those out of the way. This is going to be the point where everything is now going to catch. So just be really vigilant that none of your threads are caught up on these pins. So cross stitch and twist, cross stitch through 2 pairs, twist the worker and cross stitch and twist edge. Pin up. So, there we go. Again, I'm tensioning up more than I would do normally because we're in the thick thread. I've got 2 more pins, I think. Yeah. And I'm going to turn my pillow around again. I'm taking my cover cloth with me. I haven't pinned it down this time. Quite often I will pin it down if I'm doing something in the same position, but because I'm moving my pillow I don't tend to pin my cover cloth. I'm just going to angle that one just slightly that towards the back so it sits down. So cross stitch and twist, And I'm going to now lift up my pairs so that they're not catching on my pins. Cross stitch and trace this last pair. Pin up. Now this is my last pin, and a lot of the time you would think that you would just close the pin and leave your worker here, but there is a gap between this pin here and the pin that you're going to sew into. So by taking your worker all the way across, you're going to fill in that gap. So I always, as soon as I put the last pin in, I will continue back across a row. So I'll always put a row in just to fill that gap. There we are. So if you lift up your worker, it lifts the lace up and off the pins, so you can then tension up. Right, so that is the end of our first trail, and we now need to sew the pairs in. Before I do that, I have 3 pinholes and 5 pairs. So what I want to do is just lay 1 pair back. Now, when you lay a pair back, the rule of thumb is top threads. So I'm not going to touch either of the outside edges. So that leaves my pairs in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up. Now, can you see that thread lifts up? And when I lift the other one up, it doesn't. So that makes this left hand thread on the left bobbin of the pair the top thread. And so I'm going to lay that bobbin back, miss this next bobbin, and lay the left hand bobbin of the second pair back. Now you're going to panic at this point because it will look as if there's a gap and a hole, but these threads are pulled back over here, and when they're tied in a wreath knot, those pairs will join up that hole and it won't be a big hole. Right, so now I'm going to find my 3 pins. Just going to move this gold thread out of the way. Over there, that will hopefully stay there. So what you want to aim for is this trail is coming off at this angle, and you will find, let me show you on this one. So you might think that you need to use this pin here, but it's not, because what you're aiming for is to be in line with the pins that you've already been working on your trail. So when you come to sew in on a trail, let me try this one. Okay, so you don't want to sew in here, because that will move your trail over to the left. So what you're aiming for are the 3 that are in line with these pins that are coming down. So that would be that pin, and that pin. If you're unsure, I would tend to go for one that looks in the middle and then go one either side of that. So that means I'm looking for this pin here, this pin here, and this pin here, because it carries the trail on in the direction that it was going. So I'm going to push the other 2 down, and I'm going to take this first one and my Lazy Susan, and I'm going to push it through the hole, and I'm going to slide it to the side. Can you see I pushed it into the hole? And that's a nice big hole because I put 3 twists on it. So I pushed it to the side, the left hand side of all of those pins. I'm then going to take a pin. This is the only time I generally put a pin near my threads. So I've pushed it through the hole and I've pulled it back slightly, and it's created a loop, and I'm just going to catch that loop with a pin and pull it up. Once you have a loop that's a reasonable size, you can actually take your Lazy Susan out of the hole, and that will then mean your threads will run quite nicely. Now I have a twist on this pair and I don't want to lose that twist. So as I've said before, sometimes when you do a sewing you will lose the twist. So I always put an extra twist on. So if I do lose that twist, I still have a twist. If you don't put any on and you lose that one twist, then what will happen is your pair will have no twists on. And because we're carrying on the pattern, that's why you want the twist. So I've put my left bobbin through the loop of my Lazy Susan, and I'm just going to lay the bobbin over there, and then I'm going to hold on to these two ends and I'm going to pull through the thread through the loop. Oh, now because I've got nice big loops, because I was prepared for these sewings, by doing those 3 twists you've made a nice loop and your thread should go through. If it doesn't, I generally flick it with my fingernail. So this is the other bobbin from that pair, and I'm going to put that down the loop. I'm then going to transfer my Lazy Susan, the loop from my bobbin to my Lazy Susan, and I'm going to guide that thread down. And I always tend to do that because it won't catch on any pins. So that first worker pair is now sewn in. I'm just going to tension everything else up. And we only want one pair sewn into the 2 outside edges. Let me just check. Yes, we do. I had to think about my counting there for a minute. Right. So what I'm going to do is I want to put this pin back in. So I've put some tension on that pair, and I'm going to just it's going to catch on everything. I put some tension on that pair that I've just sewn in, and I push it to the back, and that will then open up your pinhole, and then I can put my pin in and put my pin back in my pinhole. I always do this when I'm sewing, because when you have to tie a wreath knot, you're pulling on that loop, and if you haven't got your pin in there to sustain it, it's going to push that loop out of position. So that's my first one. So now I want to find my next pin, and it's buried underneath my threads. So I'm just gonna, there's a loop there, it's probably one of those two, there we go. So I'm just going to lift my threads out of the way and get that middle bobbin, that middle pin, and pull it up and out. I'm going to make sure the threads on my Lazy Susan are equal, and I'm going to put my Lazy Susan down that pinhole. This won't be quite so bad for you because you'll be able to see, but I'm trying to do this from a distance. So right, I've gone through my hole. I'm going to pull it back slightly, and I'm going to catch my thread, and there it is. And I've taken my Lazy Susan out of the hole so that the thread will come through without the needle being in the way. So I'm going to take my first pair. Now this first pair of passives is the cross stitch and twist, so I'm going to put an extra twist on that one because then it keeps it going in the pattern, just in case I lose that twist. I'm going to put the left hand bobbin down, and I'm going to lay it over to the back, and then I'm going to pull my Lazy Susan thread down, and hopefully, there we go, it wasn't coming through, so I gave it a flick with my fingernail, I'm now going to put my Lazy Susan through the loop that I've pulled up and pull on the loop rather than the Lazy Susan thread. Oh, the other thing I didn't mention, sometimes these come through twisted, and you need to make sure that there's no twists on this loop. So now this time, because I've only got 2 pinholes and 4 pairs, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the other bobbin from that pair and 1 bobbin from the next pair over. So I'm sewing, using 1 to make the sewing and putting 2 down the loop. So that's my first bobbin and that's my second bobbin. I'm then going to put my Lazy Susan in that loop and guide that loop down. So on that pin that I've just used to sew in, on that pinhole, I've got 3 pairs now attached and 3 pairs left. And this is going to space your pairs evenly across the trail. So I'm now going to put those to the back, find my pinhole, and put the pin in, back in the pinhole. I'm going to pull those back over to here and sort them out so that you will see that the pairs want to go into a certain position. So because I still need to tie off in a pair, so I'm moving them around so that I can find out which one, because you're going to need to use one of the bobbins on this pin to tie a reef knot with one of the pairs, one of the bobbins that's on the other pin. So that one looks like it wants to be on the right. So I'm going to use that bobbin to sew a reef knot with, once I've sewn it in, with one of the pairs from this other pinhole. So now I'm going to just move my gold threads out of the way again and remove that last pin to sew in. And I've shunted all my pairs over to the left because this pin is on the right, so it's going to be easier to make the sewing with the right hand bobbin rather than have everything over there. And you still want everything coming in at that position. So I've taken the pin out, checked my Lazy Susan thread, because the amount of times when I've gone to make my sewing and I haven't left that thread an even length. So this end pair has a twist on it, so I'm putting an extra twist on. So if that twist goes missing, I've still got 1 twist. I'm going to put my Lazy Susan down the hole and to the right of the pins, pull it back, catch my thread, and then put my right hand bobbin from the last pair through that loop. And this is the point. This is going to be the worst one to do because we're dealing with the gold threads. So I'm now again laying that bobbin to the back and going to pull my loop through, and can you see it went straight through because I've got nice big holes. I like it when a sewing works like that. So I'm pulling my loop through with my Lazy Susan, making sure I've got no twists on there. And remember, I need to put 2 bobbins, so it's going to be the next 2 to the left. So that's 1 and that's 2. I do have a tendency of doing them one at a time because you're dealing with spangles, pins, so now threads that are all over the place. Okay, so I've put my Lazy Susan back in my loop, guiding my thread down, just making sure those are tight, putting some tension on those pairs, pushing them to the back so that my pinhole opens up, and putting my pin back in. And again, I'm going to rearrange my pairs so that one pair will work better on the left. No, it's definitely that one. So now I have those two to wreath knot, these two to wreath knot, and I'm just going to put them one either side of the pin. So now all I need to do is my wreath knot, and I've already shown you that in yesterday's. You will have already done that, but I just say just push it down from the top. So I'm doing my right over left, left over right. And then I will cut, once I've done all my wreath knots, I will cut this with a length.